And we're live. A very good evening, and you're very welcome. To those of you who have been in the waiting room, thank you. To those of you joining us, thank you very much for carving the time out of your precious evening to be with us. This is the second Glenisk Wisdom Series webinar, and we're delighted to bring it with you, to bring it to you this evening. There's so much noise around health, lactose, gut health. And Glenisk want to be part of a series, as I explained before on the first one, that breaks that down, busts some myths, and brings you some honest expert advice. So we have brought together all of the questions that have come in and I suppose done a roadmap of different categories that have come up time and time again and packaged those into different sections. So we've 5 sections to get through tonight, and they are basically the most common questions. So they come up time and time again. I have lots as well, and we need an expert to answer them all. So please welcome our expert dietitian this evening, Sarah Keogh. Good evening, Sarah.
Hi, Anna.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. All set. I saw the list of questions, so I think we'll be busy.
It's sizable, isn't it?
Mm.
But there
I
is,
think,
Sarah, I have to tell you, just even in the supermarket, and I'm sure I've told you this before, I'm trying to make the right choices.
yeah,
I'm thinking of myself, my needs, I'm thinking of children, their needs, husband, and you're trying to factor all of that in, all of the advertising that you don't necessarily want to consume most of it, but it goes in there and it can be really confusing in terms of making the right choices.
I think so. And that's the thing I hear from so many people is, they stand at the yogurt shelf, for example, and they're like, well, which yogurt? There's hundreds of them. And I think it's the same throughout nutrition. It's, which is the right one? And then somebody last week said that was bad and this was good. What I hear from an awful lot of people is they say they hear so many conflicting things about nutrition that they actually just give up and they just eat whatever they like and they just stop even thinking about it because it
And that's
just
the
becomes
worst thing you can
such
do, isn't
mental
it?
pressure. Yeah, but I can see why. You just
Yeah.
kind of get overwhelmed with so much noise and so much misinformation, and you just think, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what Glenisk want to do is to get the real honest information out there so people can make, I suppose, more informed choices about functional food and making ourselves feel better, having confidence around our choices, I suppose. So I think the first section we'll get stuck into, Sarah, is the piece about lactose, first of all, and what exactly it is. So will you tell us, first of all, lactose free? What does that mean, Sarah?
So, lactose is the natural sugar that turns up in milk, and it's in all milk. It is in breast milk, it's in cow's milk, it's in sheep's milk. It's the natural kind of sugar that turns up in there. And for all of us when we're born, unless you've one very, very rare genetic condition, when all of us when we're born, we can beautifully digest lactose. But for an awful lot of people, once they hit anywhere between 2 and 5, their body loses the ability to digest lactose. And for those people, if they keep eating dairy, they can run into problems like maybe some bloating. They might run into a little bit of diarrhea, a lot of gas. And for those people, we would talk about them as being lactose intolerant. So that's basically where we sit with that. So if someone is lactose intolerant, the big ones are going to be things like milk. That would be the big place where people pick up lactose.
Okay.
Cheese actually has very little. So a lot of people who are lactose intolerant can absolutely eat cheese because there's just not a lot. It's not an allergy. So lots of people think lactose is a bit like an allergy. They have to avoid all dairy. You don't. Butter and cream are fine. Cheese is fine. But yogurt sits in the middle. So yogurt will have less lactose than milk, but it definitely has it. So for some people, they can eat a little bit of yogurt and they're fine. Other people, it might make them a little bit bloated. And that's where if you're choosing a lactose-free yogurt, it's just not an issue for you if you're someone who kind of gets bloating from it.
Okay. So lactose-free dairy, is that suitable for everyone? If I don't have any issues
Yeah.
around lactose, can I still buy it? Should I still buy it?
Totally. Yeah, and it's absolutely fine. Like it doesn't actually matter because the only thing that's different in a lactose-free yogurt is that the what we when we digest lactose, lactose is made up of two smaller sugars. So one is called glucose and one is called galactose, and they're just joined together. And when they're joined together, we call them lactose. In the human body, if you digest lactose, you have an enzyme which is just in your gut, and it just splits that lactose for you. And all that happens with a lactose-free yogurt is a very similar, if not same enzyme, is used into the yogurt to just do that split for you. So there's nothing else added. It's nothing taken away. All of the nutrition is still there, and that's why I love it. It's fantastic for people that you have this option in terms of being lactose free, but the nutrition is exactly the same and it's suitable for everybody. There's nothing in it that anyone can't have or enjoy and get all the lovely benefits of the calcium and the protein and everything that's in the yogurt.
You've kind of covered off because someone else had asked, is it less nutritious as a result? So no is the answer. It's not.
No, and it's not. And you know what? Calcium is such an important nutrient. We talk about bone health and all of those things that I think, years ago, if someone was lactose intolerant or they were struggling with bloating or anything like that, there just wasn't an option in terms of kind of that. And now that, you have something like that available, that's brilliant access to all of the nutrition that's in there, all of the calcium and all of the protein.
Why does lactose-free yogurt often taste sweeter? Someone said.
Yeah, it's a really good question. If you try lactose-free milk, it often tastes a little bit sweeter. The reason for that is that lactose as a sugar actually isn't that sweet. But when you split it, glucose and galactose, the smaller sugars, are much sweeter. So there isn't any
Okay.
actual added sugar. People say to me, oh, they put loads of sugar. This, everyone is like, they put lots of sugar in that. It's terrible. They actually don't. It's literally just the sugars taste sweeter. So fructose tastes like is the sweetest sugar. And then sort of galactose and glucose would be a little less sweet, but they are sweeter than lactose. So it's just the split. So it's exactly the same amount of sugar. And it's that naturally occurring sugar. It's not an added sugar. It's just a shift from the lactose to the smaller sugars.
What about someone says, and you've touched on this, but there's another element, I suppose, to this particular question, and it's a great question. Does it still contain all the same calcium, protein, and live cultures as regular yogurt?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all that actually happens if you're something that's lactose free, they've literally just split that lactose into the smaller sugar. They haven't changed anything around protein content, calcium content, all of that is still in there. So it's the same thing, all the same. That's what's lovely about it. It's the same benefits. It just doesn't have the lactose.
Brilliant. Okay. Does that apply to children as well, Sarah?
Yeah, and it's absolutely fine for children because I know, like you will have lots of kids who are lactose intolerant as well. Although I say you always, always, always have to go to the doctor and make sure that that's what it is. No self-diagnosis. The thing I see for lots of parents, everyone just goes, "Oh, well, anything that's wrong, let's just cut out dairy." Well, let's just not because it's a really important food for kids. Always check it out. But if you have a
And are we
proper
too
diagnosis,
quick? Sorry, just to pick you up on that point,
yeah,
Sarah.
yeah,
Are we too quick to go, that doesn't work for him or her and kind of
yes.
deprive them of a whole category of food?
Totally. I mean, it's a huge thing with that because you go anywhere. I was actually at a family gathering recently and someone said, "Oh, I have this particular," and I'm not going to name the condition because they'll know who I'm talking about, but I have this particular thing. And someone just pops up over my shoulder and goes, "We have to cut out wheat and dairy." And I was like, "No, no, you don't. You're going to go to your doctor. You're going to look for this, and this. But it's this quick thing, cut out wheat and dairy all the time. So I think sometimes it's the first thing they do. But the first thing you need to do, particularly with kids, go to the doctor, get checked out. Sometimes it's dairy, but less often than you think with that. So I think we are too quick to cut it out. And there can be so many other things going on, and it delays the diagnosis with it.
Okay.
But just back to it, your lactose-free yogurt is totally suitable for children as well and absolutely fine. There's nothing in it, that it's like people kind of go, well, can everybody eat gluten-free food? If they want to, they can. Can everybody eat lactose-free yogurt? Totally. Like there's no reason not to.
Yes. And we're not losing out on any of those key
No,
nutrients as a
nothing at
result
all.
of it.
No.
Let me move on to signs and sensitivities because there's a lot of questions around that. What's the difference between lactose sensitivity and intolerance?
To be honest, they're the same thing.
Okay.
With that. But what you will get is everybody is a little bit different. So how they experience their symptoms can just be a little bit different. So some people who are lactose intolerant, really know all about it. And then other people, they're like, I'm not really sure, or I notice it sometimes. And I think it's one of the things, as a dietitian, I work a lot in gut health. So, the thing that comes in a lot is I'm bloated. And you're like, okay, but that can be 20 things. But when you look at it, some people, one of the things that I would often do is a type of diet called a low FODMAP diet, which is talking about fermentable carbohydrates. And what they are is they're carbohydrates like lactose and another thing called fructan, which are naturally in foods and for most of us are totally fine. But for some people, your gut bacteria ferment them in a funny way. So if you
Okay.
get lactose in, your bacteria ferment it. If you get fructans in, they ferment it. But what we would do is we would take them out and reintroduce them, and the dose people can handle varies. So for some people, the tiniest bit of lactose actually is an issue, but for other people, they can handle a little bit more, or if they spread it out over the day, it's not as big an issue with things like that. So that's where it's the sensitivity with it just changes. But at the end of the day, it's the same problem in the sense that the body's
Okay.
just not digesting the lactose for you.
Is it fair to say, and this is slightly off topic and more of a human nature thing, but I have friends who have made correlations between the most random things, like a particular perfume, for example, and headaches. Whereas
Yeah.
it took me probably 2 decades to recognize that I get headaches when I have my period, for example. Like I'm really
Yes.
bad at making those connections. And
Mhm.
some people are highly attuned to it,
Yes.
because it's very much a day. It's a bit like being bloated, isn't it? Some days I am, some days I'm not. Can I link it to anything? No, I can't. But maybe I'm just not great at that linking bit.
Well, the bloating thing is actually funny because what you will know from working as a dietitian, if particularly if you're looking around kind of changes in bacteria that are affected by our food, you might get bloated today but not get bloated tomorrow. So I think
Yeah.
I'd see a lot for bread is there's a thing in bread called fructan, which for most of us is actually very healthy and really good for us. But if you've got a bit of irritable bowel syndrome, fructan can make you bloated and give you constipation. But what you'll actually see is someone, if they eat white bread, they have more bloating, but if they eat brown bread, they don't. So everyone's like, well, is it wheat? Is it gluten? But actually, it's just white bread has more fructan. Brown bread has less fructan. Or if they eat bread today, but not for the rest of the week, they're okay. But if they have it 3 days in a row, they get it. So the dose, that's where you can, like, what is going on with my bloating? That's why I'd say you rule out anything more serious and you see a registered dietitian because we'll help you through an awful lot of that. So when it's that hit and miss and you're thinking, today I ate it and I was fine, but last week I ate it and I was sick, that's a
Hmm.
little trickier to figure out. So you're definitely not alone in people going, I have no idea what's going on here. But we can, if you're working with a dietitian who's experienced, they'll
Yeah.
often they'll know kind of from what you're telling. They'll take a good history and have a
Okay.
look.
Because it's very easy to take, I'm kind of taking part of this next question and slightly elaborating on it. But, if you feel signs, for example, we're all human, we've all tapped our symptoms into ChatGPT or Google, Dr. Google or whatever. And you come out with complete misdiagnosis. But don't tell me you
Yeah.
haven't done it yourself, Sarah. Um, you know, what are the very obvious signs?
So with lactose intolerance, the big one I would see is the bloating is definitely there, but the vast amounts of gas
Okay.
from below. I'm going to be really blunt, a lot of farting, right? Like I see flatulence and I realize a lot of people don't know what I mean, but like huge amounts of gas. I remember one parent going, my child, before we got diagnosed, he actually farted in the back of the car one day and I thought the child was actually going to deflate. So huge amounts of gas. So if you're someone who's very windy, and just to actually back up slightly, and I always feel sorry for the person who did this research, but it's normal to kind of fart a little bit around 15 times a day. So that's
Okay.
completely
That's good
normal.
advice.
But it's good to know because people are like, well, am
Yeah.
I terribly windy? But where it is, if you're finding you're sitting in a meeting at work and you're like, I have got so much gas in here that really wants to get out, and this is not the time, and you're trying to go out to the bathroom and you find you're going to the bathroom 10 times a day at work just for gas, or everyone in the house is going, oh, daddy is gassy or mommy is gas, that we see those things a lot. It's not normal to be uncomfortable with huge amounts of gas with that. Now look, if you haven't eaten chickpeas in a year and you eat a giant bowl of chickpeas, you're going to have gas tomorrow. If you suddenly eat an
Yes.
increase in fiber, that's normal. But if you're not really changing your diet and you're eating along all the time, the gas is the really, really big one with the bloating. With lactose intolerance, if you read sort of medical textbooks, they'll talk about diarrhea. And you can get it, but I've plenty of people who don't. And what they might get instead, and I'm sorry, I'm really getting down into it here, is a
No, no, do. It's important.
very large bowel movement. What I get from parents is they talk about the child like completely filling the up to the watermark on the toilet, and they were
Wow.
like, "How can one small child produce this much poo, basically?" So sometimes it gets into diarrhea, but sometimes they often talk about it being this lovely, a frothy diarrhea, and anyone who's ever seen it will know exactly what I'm talking about. But I wouldn't always wait for diarrhea with it. I find the bloating and the huge amounts of gas with it.
Okay.
But a lot of people have, without realizing, figured out they're lactose intolerant. And I would know that where someone would come into and go, well, I'll eat cheese, but I don't take milk and I don't take yogurt. Or they might just put a tiny drop of milk in their tea or something like that. And if you dial back, it's from childhood where they just realized they didn't feel well when they ate it. Without consciously thinking about it, they just move away from food. So you'll see that sometimes even with celiac disease, a lot of kids move away from eating bread and pasta. And people think, oh, they're fussy. But I'm going, hang on. That's an odd food for kids not to like from
Yeah.
fussy. point of view, so that kind of comes in. A lot of people are lactose intolerant and just don't know because from young age they've been avoiding it.
Okay, amazing. Now, someone else says, can you develop it later in life
Yeah.
at any stage?
So generally what it is, the main lactose intolerance that we would talk about, say in Ireland, is the one that, so to be honest, most people in the world lose the ability to digest lactose between the age of 2 and 5. It's actually unusual to keep being able to digest lactose. It's quite a North European genetic change. But late in life, it can turn up late in life, but it is usually caused by something else. So
Oh,
if you
okay.
get lactose intolerant later on, it's very often a sign you've got celiac disease. So with celiac disease, the damage done to the gut means you're temporarily lactose intolerant. So if you suddenly wake up and you're like, you've been drinking milk fine for years and suddenly you're getting bloated and gassy and things like that, I'd be getting a celiac test for it. You can sometimes be lactose intolerant if you've had a really bad tummy bug. But that's quite temporary. But like that, if you find that you've had, the kids have brought home the latest bug from school or crash or whatever, and you've all had it we've all been there.
Yeah,
And for a couple of days afterwards, you might find things are, so that's where that lactose free is brilliant. At that stage with stuff like that. But that should come back, and if it doesn't, go in and get checked.
that's when you're off to the GP. And the same, I assume, Sarah, for the celiac test. It's a GP visit,
Yeah,
isn't it?
100%. That's so important because there's lots of marketing of all kinds of food sensitivity or food intolerance test. For celiac, none of those either rule it in or out. So they're not reliable for celiac. You absolutely have to go to your GP. And just to say, if you're going to get celiac tested, you must be eating gluten for at least 6 weeks before you get tested. Lots of
Oh,
people Lots of people go, well, I'll cut out the gluten and see how I feel. But that means when you finally go to get tested, your test will be negative because cutting out the gluten fixes the problem. So you have
yeah.
to be eating gluten. Lots of people say, oh no, I'm gluten intolerant because the test was negative, but the test was negative because you'd stopped eating the gluten. So
So it's not
really,
an accurate picture.
no, it's not. And the problem is if you're celiac, you've got to be 100% gluten free. Whereas if you're gluten intolerant, you're like, oh, well, I'll have a bit of bread today, or, that kind of way. But with the celiac, you've got to be fully. So it's worth getting the test because then you know how strict you've got to be or not with it.
Of course. Okay. Someone's asked this question. Can you retrain your gut to tolerate it again?
No,
No.
no. Once the little enzyme is gone for you to break down the lactose, it doesn't come back. Now, if you
Okay.
had it from that you had a really bad tummy bug or you had an illness that like with the celiac, for example, most people come back to being able to tolerate the lactose again. But if you're someone who, just it ran out when you were early childhood, that does not come back.
Okay. Can hormones, stress, or menopause affect how we digest dairy?
So to be honest, what we think is look like stress and hormones, menopause all have an effect on the gut. So it changes everything. So sometimes people find that they were able to eat absolutely everything and everything was fine. And suddenly something like perimenopause, I wouldn't even say you have to wait till periods have stopped, but even just that perimenopause where the hormones are kind of doing that all the time, we do see changes. We see the muscle relaxes a little bit. So if you think of your bowel as sort of a big long tube and it's got to be squeezing with the muscle to move things along, those muscles
Hmm.
get a little softer. If anyone's been pregnant, the last 2 months of pregnancy and you've that horrific constipation and it's just because all the muscles are beautifully relaxing. So that can happen with menopause. We tend to see more bloating, more constipation, things aren't moving through. And because of that, more things are hanging around, maybe and fermenting. So there's a little bit more bloating with that. So that definitely does happen. Stress is a really interesting one on the gut. Having worked for years on things like irritable bowel and things, 30 years ago when I started working in it, it was like, oh, it's all stress. And these days, stress is a factor, but I would kind of go, I don't know which came first, the stress, or are you stressed because you have this irritable bowel? Because irritable bowel can be so nasty. It can be mild, a bit of bloating through to people having diarrhea 15 times a day. So it can be really debilitating. So stress is definitely in there. And a lot of people with irritable bowel will say it'll aggravate, but there's usually something else underlying it as well. But separate to that, we do know there's that whole gut brain connection. And, if you've ever had butterflies in your stomach, you know what that, been thinking about something and you'll feel it in the tummy. And definitely we know that if someone is very stressed, we can see changes in movement in the gut. So we can see things maybe speed up a little bit in the small bowels, slow down a little bit in the large bowels. So sometimes it can be in there. But it's rarely the whole picture. You would be looking at, what I would say is you might look at foods as well. And what is interesting, and I have a colleague who does a lot of work in this, they're finding that if they do gut hypnotherapy, that some food sensitivities people have actually go away.
This is like a
So
whole other webinar. Gut
I'll get
hypnotherapy,
her. I'll get you
wow.
a touch. Brilliant. But it's a really interesting one. But it does mean that sometimes you might actually be getting bloated from things that actually at other times are fine. So, sometimes you can try out a few different things and see does it help.
And we're
With
human and we change and our emotions change and our day
yeah,
changes, every
even your
single
sleep
day.
and yeah, there's so much of that going on. And I think when you're really busy as well, sometimes you look back and think, "Do you know what? I actually didn't eat any fiber yesterday, or I didn't get any food, or I didn't stop." And I think we one of the things that I often say is that, we need to actually rest. We need to stop. We talk about getting good nutrition in, but if you don't ever stop and rest, your body is on permanent high alert and you don't get a chance to build that in. If someone's really stressed and you start seeing their hair falling out,
Yeah.
it's just no matter how well you're eating, we actually need to stop. And, I often remember someone saying to me years ago, like humans are the only animals that don't rest when they're tired, you know.
Yeah. It's so
Every,
true. And
come on.
sleep.
Yeah,
Sleep is another one
yeah,
that's just so important. And I think you
huge.
learn that as well as you get a bit older and a bit more sensible, don't you?
There's a reason things like yoga and a hot bath actually really help the gut.
Let me move on. We're on gut health and everyday kind of well-being, this category. Um, the gut-brain connection everyone's talking about. That's exactly what you just touched on there. That's
Yeah.
become a big kind of hot topic, hasn't it?
It has, and it's for a couple of reasons. Like one of the things that they're looking at, so really understanding more about the biology is that, we sometimes we talk about the gut being the second brain, and
Yeah.
that's really because of the amount of nerves that it has and the really strong connection it has to the brain. So we talk about how many nerves are in your brain. We have the next closest is your gut. And also your gut makes serotonin. So serotonin is your happy hormone. And when it was first researched, it was really focused on the brain. And now we realize that maybe 80–90% of our serotonin is made in the gut. So having a healthy gut, it looks like it'll turn out to have a really big role in terms of just mental health as well. So I think it's definitely an area that needs a good bit more research, but it's a really fascinating area with it.
Fascinating, isn't it? I developed rosacea in the last few years, and I think that's a gut thing, or maybe I'm just assuming it is, because when you do any levels of research on it, even talk to skin experts, they will often talk about the link to the gut. And
And
perimenopause, of course, is another factor,
oh,
I
well,
suppose, in terms of
isn't it?
my
And
age.
also it's genetic. It's a little bit of an Irish gene as well with it.
Okay.
But for just showing up, I'd look across the board with it. I mean, for some people it's an infection and it is an antibiotic that needs to be treated, and that's where your dermatologist is going to be so helpful. But over the years, I've had people come into me and they've had bad breath, and we sorted out the gut, and the bad breath went away, or bad body odor, and we sorted out the gut, and it went away. I always think the body's going to get rid of waste somewhere, so we need to sort it out. And I think so many people like just don't get enough fiber in to actually get the gut working properly. And when you do that, so many other things reset with that, and the body just feels better. And across the board, if I working with anybody, as a dietitian, you're always asking what's going on with the gut. And it's great these days when I'm doing celiac because everyone expects it. But when someone used to come into me for fertility and you're like, okay, how's your digestion? And like, that's not the bit of the body we're talking about. But it's like, actually, it all lines up. It's all relevant to your health.
It's an important element, all of the cogs, I suppose. Someone else mentions brain fog, bloating, tiredness, all linked to gut health as well.
Well, particularly if you're getting brain fog and tiredness and a funny gut, will you please go and get a celiac test? That's a lot of things to have together without kind of going and getting it checked. And one of the big things we find is that particularly around menopause, where a lot of people are talking, oh, well, I've got brain fog, is that menopause? And I've got bloating, is that menopause? We generally have people getting diagnosed with celiac disease at a night level. Around menopause, suddenly there's a big decrease in celiac disease being diagnosed in women and later but it's just because all of the symptoms are, oh, that's menopause. Whereas actually, do you know what? Sometimes it's celiac, and particularly with the brain fog, I'd rule it out. There's always a thing we just say is, have you ruled out celiac disease? Have you just checked? Because, celiac disease primarily focuses in the gut, but it also affects the nervous system in about a third of people. So brain fog, fatigue, pins and needles, even for some people, loss of balance and things like that. So particularly if you've fatigue and bloating and brain fog, I'd be ruling that out. If it's not that, then yes, let's look at what your nutrition is. What are you eating? Because we can be missing out on things. And even if your B vitamins are low, if you haven't got enough fiber in for the gut to work properly, because that's going to feed your gut bacteria, which are so important. So it is all related with that. But I'd always be with the gut, rule out the bad stuff. The amount of people I've had come into me over the years and go, I have a bit of irritable bowel, and they're listing these symptoms, and like, no, and they come back and it turns out to be Crohn's disease, and they've needed to be on really
Okay.
right, substantial treatment. So no self-diagnosis is very important with the gut.
Yeah, take it seriously. In terms of fixing not fixing the gut, but improving, I suppose, the gut.
Yeah.
Are there go-to foods that you would suggest that
Mm.
will be, super kind to the gut for everyone?
Yeah, I mean, there's the two big things that I absolutely love for gut health, and now they're not for absolutely everybody, but for most people, my favorite thing is linseed or flaxseed. And the reason for that is that it actually has kind of a gel inside it that when it gets into the gut, it's a a really gentle type of fiber, and nobody is allergic to, well, not, you'll always find someone, but almost no, like it's really, really rare you ever see someone go, no, I'm intolerant to that or anything. And it's just lovely because you can actually give people quite a lot of it if you need to, up to about 4 dessert spoons, not in one go. And
Okay.
if you're going to do that, give yourself 4 weeks. But if someone is struggling, even with constipation and even with diarrhea, and if something more serious is ruled out, we're looking at sort of maybe an irritable bowel or, flaxseed is a lovely thing to add in small amounts to try, but also with water. But I love adding in things like kind of yogurt. There's some really interesting research around fermented foods in the gut. Now, again, a lot more research needed, but some of the studies we've seen around fermented foods are suggesting that we might see, greater variety of gut bacteria and, so you're just rebalancing a little bit with that. So I love that kind of fermented food, the flaxseed if we were looking for a specific food, but easily 60% of the time when I'm working with someone who is struggling with gut issues, if we've ruled out the celiac and the Crohn's disease and
Yeah.
everything else, fiber is just so central. And we just know that people are not hitting fiber targets. 80% of people in Ireland don't eat enough fiber, and your gut simply doesn't work if you're not getting the fiber in. And people spend a lot of money, they get into supplements and probiotics and all of those
Yeah.
things, which have their benefit, but it's a bit like trying to put a roof on a house with no walls and no foundation. You have to get the fiber in. And there's a lot less fiber in food than you think. You're looking for 25 grams of fiber a day. you know, High fiber breakfast cereals, most of them you're looking between 3 and 5 or 6 grams per serving. Some will be a little higher, but they're not as, now they're great. And it's not, they're actually brilliant. But like a serving of fruit and veg is giving you 2 or 3 grams of fiber. So if your whole fiber intake is a bowl of cereal and a banana, you're probably not hitting 8 grams of fiber, and you need
Hmm.
25. So it's really important to kind of get that fiber up. And again, I would say go and see a registered dietitian because, we'll go and see a physio and we go to our doctor and we will take random nutrition advice from anybody on the internet and we wonder
Yeah.
why things are going well. And sometimes one session with a dietitian for a lot of things will sort out some bit. Now, some people need a lot more support, but certainly with from fiber, it's amazing the amount of people who genuinely think they're eating enough fiber and they're not, and suddenly their bloating and their constipation is gone.
Yeah, yeah. I have a breakfast most mornings that consists of the same thing. Can I tell you what it is? And you can you
Go
can
for it.
appraise it and but be as honest as you like, right?
Okay.
It's some porridge,
Hmm.
um, Glenisk, obviously yogurt,
Yeah.
low fat yogurt,
Mhm.
blueberries, honey, chia seeds, and what's the other seeds? Not flax seeds, linseed seeds.
Okay. So linseed and flaxseed are the same thing.
Oh,
And
are
for the
they?
yeah, I don't know why they get two different names, but they're the same thing. But no, perfect. And what you've got is lots of fiber in there. And what's actually really lovely about that is you've lots of different kinds of fiber. And what we're finding in terms of particularly gut bacteria is different gut bacteria like different kinds of fiber. And people who are eating those lots of different fibers seem to have slightly healthier kind of gut bacteria and gut with it. So if you get 25 grams of fiber, all the same type, it doesn't seem to be as good as 25 grams of fiber from lots of different sources. So we use the oats in there, which is a lovely type of fiber called beta glucan. You get into things like blueberries, you have a little bit of pectin in there. The seeds are good for roughage and things. There's a gorgeous mixture with that. So that's a lovely one. You're
Okay.
probably
It's
halfway
probably the
there.
healthiest meal of my entire day, which is why I thought I'd ask you.
Loads of people say that for, yeah, I won't ask you lunch. No, loads of people say that to me for breakfast. Like everyone goes, my breakfast is great. And people eat the most amazing breakfast. I actually, some days I'm going, wow, I wish I was that healthy for
Yeah,
breakfast,
no, but it goes downhill from there.
It
But
goes
I'm
downhill for a
happy
lot
that
of,
I'm starting the
yeah.
day the right way anyway.
But you know what? You do what you can. And I think we spend too much time feeling guilty about what we're eating. And I think we
Yeah.
waste too much of our brain power on it. And I think if you can get it right sometimes, you're actually ahead of the game.
Very true. Okay, let me jump on to someone has had a good question here about gut just before I move off that topic. The best way to rebuild gut health after antibiotics or illness. We often hear this. I even remember my mother growing up, she probably still says to me, if you're on a course of antibiotics, you go, you need a good tonic now after that. Is that a real Irish thing?
It's a real Irish thing, but we look at it and I think it's not even specific to the antibiotic. It's just you've been sick. and your body probably needs a little bit of support with it. Now it depends on how sick you were. You know, I often think people are like, "Oh my God, I need to do all these things because I had an antibiotic," and you're like, "Do you know what? You had a bit of an ear infection. You're on antibiotic for a
Yeah.
week. You're grand. We probably don't need to panic." But if you've had six ear infections, or you've had an ear infection and then a chest infection and something else, I'd be going, what's going on with the immune system here? What's missing? So you might just look at your total nutrition because, when we look at the immune system, your B vitamins are important, your vitamin D is important, your protein is important, and that's where yogurt comes in really nicely with that. Like there's a whole sweep of things going on if you've had repeated infections. So it's not necessarily because of the antibiotics that you need to check it out. It's because you've been sick six times
Yeah.
in the year. What are you missing? Are you not getting enough sleep? Are you, is your nutrition, is that looking good? And, again, when I used to do a lot of clinics like that, I would regularly get people coming in because they've had so many infections. And particularly women who were having like thrush and things like that, and it just was not going away. And then you look at their diet, and sure, their protein is in their boots. So your immune system is just not, it needs that, and it really needs the B vitamins, and it really needs the vitamin C. There's all of these things involved in just keeping the immune system lovely and healthy and just at a nice, normal, healthy level.
Okay. So not overdoing it, but just basic healthy
Yeah,
meals. Yeah.
yeah. And
Um,
if you're someone who's struggling a lot, like something like your multivitamin mightn't be any harm while you're trying to get your diet in order.
Yeah, that's probably the time to use it, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah.
In terms of balance and timing, this section is interesting because I suppose it's the right time of the day and how often and how much. Because sometimes we think we're being healthy. I remember getting what's the name of the NutriBullet?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And it could be any, God, I shouldn't be mentioning a brand. It could be any mixer or whatever you call
Yeah,
that
yeah.
category of electronics. Um,
Called the Whizzer in our house. But anyway,
which
it's called the Whizzer in our
the
house.
whizzer, the
The
whizzer.
Whizzer,
I
yeah,
got a
whatever.
whizzer, and I started whizzing up avocados and all sorts of healthy things, or so I thought. But actually, what I was doing was adding almost another meal into my day. And it was
Yeah.
just a ridiculous amount of calories to be taking in. And I kind of, copped onto it fairly soon that this isn't really a healthy on the go thing. It's another meal that's not really required if your other meals are balanced, I suppose. So we can kind of get carried away sometimes and, not do ourselves any favors. I'm not on my own there, am I?
No, definitely not. And I'm kind of laughing when you're talking because I remember someone had gone and been advised, right, you need to do all this juicing. And whatever about a smoothie, you've got the whole fruit and veg in there. So you have the fibre and everything. But this person, no
Yeah.
juice because on all the fiber's gone. And they were basically drinking 2 liters of juice a day. And at that stage, that's like drinking 2 liters of soft drink. And
Yeah.
I'm watching her putting on weight and and she's like, I'm doing all this healthy eating. I don't know why I keep putting on weight. And I was like, I do. But it's,
That was me.
so it's just one of those things where the smoothies actually, I love them because not everybody's great on the texture of fruit and veg. And,
Mm,
I'm saying to someone, you need to be getting fruit and veg at every meal. And they're like, the feel of it just puts me off. I just can't. But you know what? If you whiz it all up in the smoothie and you get it all in one go, that is fantastic. Go for it. But as you say, what are you putting in? Avocados are fantastic, but wow, are they high in calories?
yeah.
If you're having a half of one with your dinner or something like that, that's totally. Now I eat a whole one because I always end up throwing in the bin if I don't eat them. But it's
Mm,
keeping an eye on it like that. But if what you were putting in was like, a handful of spinach and an apple and some water, whatever, the calories aren't going to be that huge, but the nutrition is amazing out of them. So that's what I'd say to you. Yes, but I'd say you were getting fantastic nutrition and antioxidants and everything all out of doing that. But I think it's just balance. It's just building it in a little bit. And it's smoothies. I love them for people who aren't great. And I always love everyone. Do you hear people give out about smoothies all the time? And nobody gives out about soup, which is the same thing, you know?
yeah.
Like it's vegetables cooked and liquidized. So, and it's just, some of us love eating crunchy raw veg, and some people it just doesn't work for you. And sometimes when you're busy, it can just be so handy.
So handy and so handy to get fruit or certain fruits into children that they won't normally
Yes.
eat as well,
Yeah.
because it's mixed with yogurt or, it's a fun drink rather than something that they're being
Yes.
forced to eat.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. No, that's totally fine.
How much yogurt per day is a healthy amount? So we're coming back to portions here, portion
Yeah.
control, Sarah.
So what we would actually look at is, to be honest, we talk about getting from a general health, and if you look at sort of the National Food Pyramid and guidelines and stuff like that, we talk about getting 3 servings of dairy in a day for adults, and that's really about, now sadly it's not butter and cream.
Yeah.
It is milk, cheese, and yogurt. So certainly, within that, it could be 3 glasses of milk, 3 yogurts, 3 pieces of cheese, or a mixture of any of them. So three yogurts a day you can absolutely do if you love them that much, go for it. But the little pots, you're looking about 120, 150 grams of yogurt. So that's
Yeah.
absolutely, I would think that's usually 3 good dessert spoons for me. Per pot with it. So yeah, it's absolutely fine. And as I said, I love yogurt as a food because it has that protein and it has the calcium, and it's actually quite filling. I don't know about that. If I'm coming up to dinner and I'm kind of hungry and I don't actually want to eat a load of stuff because I'm cooking, that you're cooking dinner and you're starving. So I'd often have a yogurt, something like that with it, because it's that bit of nutrition and it's not just a biscuit, that way. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah,
it's
I was going to
not a biscuit,
say rather
but
than a cracker or something, which is probably
yeah.
what I'd be likely to grab while I'm making the dinner, but it's a smarter
Yeah.
choice.
Well, it is if it's the first thing that catches my eye. So it's like if I see the cracker first, sometimes it's that. But you're just kind of going, if I'm going to have a snack, is there something that's actually giving me some really nice nutrition? And I sometimes think, from a health point of view, it's a nice little, I'm going to have a snack because I'm really hungry. And just catch yourself and going, is there something I could add in here that would be good? Now, when I'm really hungry, fruit just doesn't do it for me because there's just not enough calories in it. Whereas I
Yeah.
love something like yogurt because with the protein in it and everything else, it just fills you up. For me, it makes me feel full a little bit longer with it. So it just gets me all the way to dinner without being cranky and mean to my children.
Yeah. Hangry.
Yes.
Someone says, should I take a probiotic supplement if you eat live yogurt every day? Is there any need?
Yeah, probably. I mean, the thing about probiotics is that there's a lot of them out there, and they all do slightly different things. This idea where we just pop a probiotic all the time, it depends on what we're looking for with them. Probably not. You don't need to go mad with it, but you know, it's an area I'd love to see a lot more research on. Some
Mm,
have a lot more research than others, all of that sort of thing. What we do know is really when we're looking at the gut, get the fibre in and fermented foods. And those two things seem to work just really, really well together. And if your fermented food happens to be a probiotic as well, or it happens to be live as well, great. You could end up spending a fortune. Again, you did everything with it. But I think if you have those baseline things in, you'll be doing fine with them.
And what are the other fermented foods that we should know about, Sarah?
Well, anything what the science has said, it's still relatively new, so we're still learning a lot more about it. But it's where there's been that fermentation, where there's yeast or there's bacteria, and the benefit seems to be not necessarily even the bacteria for some of these, but some of what the compounds those bacteria are making, and that's then naturally in the food. So, people are looking and doing a lot of research on things like kombucha,
Mm,
kefir, sauerkraut, but even things like tofu is a fermented food. When I
okay.
pointed out that, sourdough bread is a fermented food, even yeast bread, yeast is it's a fermentation, with that. But it's lovely to bring those in. And I think again, you're bringing in a variety in your diet. And with fermented vegetables, you've got the fiber that's in there as well as that the fact that they've been fermented. So it's kind of the research is really interesting coming out on that. Again, love to see more research on it to really, drill down into are there any specific benefits, that we can talk about. But broad studies look at that sort of benefit potentially to more bacteria in the gut and things like that.
Yeah, because we are seeing more fermented food recipes knocking around as well, aren't
Yeah.
we? Because they're
Yeah.
not necessarily, well, they're not staples, tofu, kefir, kombucha.
Not
We
in
might
Ireland
pick them
anyway,
up,
but
but
yeah,
not yet.
getting there. But I think we're
Exactly.
experimenting, and I love that, the huge shift in how we eat. Like it's so funny. Like 20 years ago, I remember giving a talk to a group of people in their 60s, and I mentioned pasta, and the stony face. Nobody in the room ate pasta 20 years ago in their 60s. Today, it's like, oh, yeah, and here's the quinoa. So
Yeah.
I love that we're embracing that huge variety in our food and experimenting. And I suppose one of the things about the access to things like the internet and even social media, recipes coming along all the time, and you're thinking, I could do that, and I'm seeing people playing around with so many different vegetables and flavorings and spices and all of those lovely things having benefits to the gut as well.
Yeah. And I actually think Irish restaurants really box above their weight in terms of
Yes.
the variety and the level of kind of, I suppose, unusual ingredients that they use as well. So maybe we can take some inspiration from them too. Is there a best time of day to eat yogurt? Morning, after meals, or before bed?
No, and actually, it's totally fine. I get asked a lot of that. Is the best
Do
time to eat
you?
this? The best time to eat that? The human body just digests what you throw at it. There's slight variations with absorption of some micronutrients at different times of the day, and but in general, just eat. If you fancy having a yogurt before you go to bed, that's totally fine. If we look at things particularly around stuff like protein, there's some studies for people who are doing like serious kind of athletics and training and bodybuilding that having a bit of protein close to bedtime seems to be quite good for muscle building. Things like that. But no, whenever you fancy having it, there's no time it's bad to take it.
Okay. Is full fat or low fat better for gut health and nutrient absorption?
Doesn't make any difference. I'm always
Really?
fascinated with the dairy. Yeah. It's like, oh, full fat milk. Full fat milk actually has the least amount of calcium and skimmed milk has the most. Which everybody's like, really? It's like, yeah. Now the differences are so tiny, it doesn't matter. But there is this idea that if you have low fat milk or skimmed milk, it has less calcium. That's not true. And it's the same with the
Well,
yogurt.
I completely thought that. I have to put my hand up and say
Really?
I
Okay.
would buy low fat milk for myself
hmm
and I would buy full fat milk for the kids for exactly that reason, because I'd be thinking they need all of the nutrients.
All the nutrients are in the low fat milk, just like if you're
Wow.
going for low fat yogurt, all the nutrients are still in there. It's just less fat. So what it is, kids do need the full fat milk until they're at least 2, but I love to see them on the full fat milk till they're 5. That's because under 5s have different nutrient needs. They actually need more fat. But no, this if you want to give them full fat milk all the time, it's fine. But low fat milk after age 5 for kids. But for no, there's actually just slightly more calcium in the low fat.
Wow, that's great to know. Okay. Is lactose free suitable for diabetics or people watching their cholesterol?
Yes, absolutely suitable for both. Someone with diabetes, people often think, oh, you have to watch sugar, but actually with diabetes, you're watching all of your carbohydrate. And so if someone does have diabetes, especially your type 1, people with type 1 diabetes, which is the autoimmune disease, they will be really well looked after, I hope, with their dietitian and their hospital team. With type 2 diabetes, it's very hit and miss. So I would say if you have type 2 diabetes, get your GP to refer you to the community dietitians who do diabetes education programs. They're group classes, but they are fantastic. Um, don't
Is that
go to,
like a local health center,
yeah, your
Sarah, rather
HSC.
than anything private?
You can definitely see a dietitian privately, absolutely one to one, which is fantastic. But there's the community dietitians in the HSE are running
Brilliant.
really fantastic education programs, and I think it just takes the fear out of it because again, you think, oh well, I have to cut out all the sugar, and then they're going, well, does that mean I have to cut out fruit, and do I have to cut out yogurt, and do I have to cut out? And you don't, because you have to have a balanced diet. You still need your calcium, you still need your fiber. So those programs are brilliant if you're struggling with something like diabetes. Definitely get your GP to refer you in. As I said, you can see somebody privately as well, but not everybody has the resources to do that. But no, totally fine. In terms of sort of blood glucose, yogurts actually don't put blood glucose up very high. Now, if you go and you get the chocolate caramels with the marshmallows on top, okay, that's dessert. But if you're just having like a plain yogurt or a fruit yogurt, most of the time that's going to be fine, or you balance it with your insulin or your medication with that. And that's the thing about yogurt. People get terribly excited about sugar in yogurt. So in a plain yogurt, the sugar is the naturally occurring lactose, or in the case of a lactose-free yogurt, it's the naturally occurring sort of glucose and galactose. It's not added. So when you look at the sugar on the label in a plain yogurt, even it'll say the sugar in it, but it's the naturally occurring sugar. It's not added sugar.
Okay.
Um,
And that's
fruit yogurt.
important.
It's really important. And then people go, oh, but what about fruit yogurts? Most fruit yogurts have at most about 1 teaspoon of added sugar. And I know when I say that, everyone's like, oh my God, that's loads of sugar. A 500 ml bottle of soft drink has anything from 10 to 13 teaspoons of added sugar in there.
Yeah.
So although we don't want to be eating huge amounts of sugar, nobody is saying you have to ban it. Like there's no international guidelines or anything where they're saying ban sugar. We don't need to. A little bit of sugar in a fruit yogurt. Because my thing always, and I see this a lot with clients, is they buy the plain yogurt, but they don't like the plain yogurt. So it sits in their fridge for 4 weeks and then they throw it in the bin. And an uneaten food has no nutritional value. You are
Yeah.
far better off to buy the fruit yogurt you will actually eat than the plain yogurt if you don't like it. Now I like plain yogurt, but other people just don't. So it's okay. If you're adding something like honey into your plain yogurts, the sugar's gone in anyway, because honey is
Of
a sugar as
course.
well, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, isn't it, how we'll stress over 1 teaspoon of sugar, for example, or we'll take that label apart, and yet we're just coming off the back of Halloween where the children just
Yeah.
ate a load of junk for 3 days solid. Because
Yeah.
in my head, you just have to write off that weekend post Halloween and
Yeah.
then clear out the junk and move on.
And you're not wrong. I love that. And I actually love that we just let kids eat. I was doing a radio interview last week and someone was going, right, how do we handle all the sugar on Friday night? Go, you completely ignore it and let the kids just enjoy them. Because the
Yeah.
worst thing to do is do this whole, can't eat this and it's very bad for you. Because I can tell you from dealing with kind of parents and kids, if you're really strict on something like sugar for the kids all the way, as soon as they get access to their own money, they will go wild on the sweets, and not just one bar of chocolate, they get 10. It has
Yeah.
to be really balanced with it. I'm not saying give them bags of Halloween sweets, 7 days a week, but for a holiday like that, let them off. Bit
But
of
as a
fruit yogurt,
one-off,
it's fine.
yeah,
Yeah, you're not giving them 3 bars of chocolate a day, but a fruit yogurt where it gets the calcium into them and things like that, absolutely.
yeah, a little bit of balance, I suppose. You've cleared my conscience on that as well, Sarah. Thank you.
Good.
Can older adults benefit from switching to lactose free?
Well, if they've been struggling, it's absolutely fine if they want to try it with that. But some people honestly have been struggling with something like lactose intolerance their whole life, and they haven't realized that that's why they've had a bit of a funny tummy. And the funniest thing I find is that, we talk about gut health. I'm astonished at what people don't know about their own digestion. And the biggest thing is people not knowing when something isn't normal. And if you've had a thing that's been
Okay.
going on for you your whole life, it's normal for you, but then you're talking to a dietitian and they're going, that's not normal. So I'd see people having diarrhea twice a month, and they've been having diarrhea twice a month for their whole life, and they're like, oh, that's just my twice a month diarrhea, and you're going, that's not normal. Like,
So they're
really,
accepting of the symptoms because it's become normal in their life.
it's a big one. And very often, and I don't
Yeah.
talk about celiac a lot, but like the amount of people who, if you have celiac disease, all your family needs to be checked. And all the family members will go, well, I've got no problems. And the amount of them when they're checked and diagnosed and then go on the gluten-free diet, they're like, oh, I've been bloated all my life and I didn't realize. I thought that was normal. Or I've been having diarrhea a couple of times a week. I didn't know that was normal. That they weren't so sick that they went to the doctor, but it was just an inconvenience. So, it's certainly no harm to try it, and it's totally safe for anybody to have at any age, kind of with that. And I'm going to run through it. You should be doing a poo once or twice a day. It should not be once or twice a week. And if you're going more than 3 times a day, you need to check that out. It shouldn't be a lot of effort to go. It shouldn't be a lot of work. It should come out quite easily.
Mm,
And sorry about this, but it should look like a cracked sausage or a smooth cucumber. If you're getting little hard lumps, that's constipation. You probably need to increase your fibre. Now, it can be other things with it, but that's the most common thing with it. Like, it shouldn't be runny. The amount of people who are,
yeah.
if you want to have a look at this, the Bristol stool chart will give you the 7 types of poo. You should be type 3 or 4. But it's just because people are kind of going, oh, well, that's just how I am. And you're like, that's not normal. You need to sort of
Yeah.
check stuff out with that. Yeah.
And would you say the same of all of that in terms of the regularity of poo for kids as well?
Similar. I mean, kids are a little bit different with that, and it can take a little bit of time to settle down. If you've ever breastfed, like you can go from having like 7 nappies a day to having one
Yeah,
explosive in 10
yeah,
days. So
true.
it can be so vary. But with kids, like, by the time they're sort of 6, 7, definitely the sausages and, once or twice a day and things like that, and, normal amounts of gas, and I'd always say trust your instincts as well,
Yeah, you
with
know when
kids.
your child is not quite right, don't you? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, older adults. Okay, we did that. What's a good breakfast idea for someone who avoids milk? They don't say if they're intolerant, but they avoid
Yeah.
it.
Well, honestly, I mean, if you could take yogurt is always a great one. I love yogurt and granola kind of as a thing for breakfast like that as well. If you're avoiding milk, it doesn't always have to be cereal. Like that's a fairly recent thing for us to be eating is cereal and milk, which is fabulous and it's really, really handy. But you can kind of do toast and cheese the odd morning if you like that. Eggs are always going to be fabulous. But fruit, but it's really funny. You can actually eat anything for breakfast. Do you know, I remember going on a flight to Singapore years ago and we got this gorgeous savory rice dish with mushrooms in it, which to my head was dinner, but it was a breakfast and it was fantastic. And you're just like, that's gorgeous. Anything at all, to be honest. You can have a
Yeah.
sandwich for breakfast if you feel like it. We don't have to be tied to a breakfast food if that's what you want. But I always think eggs are a good go for it. And I would always think, have you got something high fiber in there? So that's where your whole grain bread is. Or I love, the yogurt breads that you're putting a couple of tubs of yogurt into it. I absolutely love
Oh,
those.
yeah.
They're so and they're so easy to make. Honestly, if any of you
Are
have
they
ever
easy to make?
if you've ever wanted to try bread and you haven't, that Glenisk yogurt bread is
Yeah.
absolutely world class easiest thing to do. Now, I always line the tin with greaseproof paper because that's just me. Otherwise, it glues, but it might just be my tins. But if you have a look though, there it's such a handy one, and it's a great way to get yogurt in as well. And obviously, you can use the lactose free with it, which is fabulous. But you've got that bread, it's got the oats in it, and it is beautiful toasted in the morning. That's one of my go-tos for that. It
And you're
freezes
getting
really
your
well as
fibre as
well.
well. We'll talk to the powers that be in Glenisk and see if we can weave that into the next newsletter.
Yeah, it's a
I'm
great
sure they can manage it.
yeah.
Can lactose help? Just the last few questions, Sarah, and it's kind of family lifestyle. And we may have kind of touched on some of these, but can lactose-free help with skin, sinuses, or allergies?
Not that we normally see because it's really around just breaking down that kind of it's really a digestive effect. We don't usually see lactose itself affecting things wider in the body. Where that might be related to milk, it's more likely to be a milk allergy. Um, but again, let's not just automatically blame milk. There's lots of allergies out there, but there's also lots of other things. And again, I'd work with lots of people who come in with sinus issues, and actually a humidifier in the bedroom at night is remarkably nice
Really?
because sometimes if the tissue is just really dry up the nose, it just gets irritated and inflamed, and then everything is a problem. So I'd be looking at lots of other things around that. Dairy would not be my first go-to for kind of issues like that. And again, skin issues coming up, it's more likely to be if it's milk related, it's going to be an allergy rather than the lactose with that. We don't usually see it traveling out. However, I have to say at this stage in my career, nothing surprises me. Someone said to me, "Do you know, I've genuinely tried everything. It's the lactose. Do you know what? I'll believe you with it because it just when year on year you just see so much stuff. But I would look at other things. I wouldn't necessarily cut out the dairy. But the thing I see a lot is people saying, they come into me with sinus issues and they're like, "Oh yeah, I've cut out the dairy for my sinuses," and you can clearly hear they're still all bunged up. And I said, "Well, did it help?" And they go, "Well, no." I said, "Well, then you can go back on it." It's
Yeah.
quite funny where we just cut it out and but it didn't help. We'll bring it back because actually dairy is such an important food for your calcium in particular. If you didn't get better after, like I'd give it at least 6 weeks, but if you've been off it for 6 months and you've still got a sinus problem, you can definitely bring it back in again.
Yeah.
So just
Don't
be
deny
careful.
yourself the nutrition.
Yeah, but it's again, someone said, "Oh, dairy," so just bring it in. If it didn't fix it, if it didn't go away. So that's, as I said, if you go and see a dietitian for food intolerance or anything, we'll eliminate, but we'll always do a challenge. We'll always bring it back in again and just check because so many things can be coincidence. They can be, you were sick with something else at the time. You don't,
Lifestyle.
I'd always say I hate cutting food out of people's diets. I hate restricting people, and I will do anything to kind of avoid that. So if I've done something like a low FODMAP diet, which is quite restrictive, you're always doing that reintroduction to make sure that they're definitely cutting out something that is actually really a problem. Because too
Mm,
often people cut it out and they never bring it back in again. And
yeah.
suddenly, and I'd have people coming in and they've like 50 foods they don't eat. And you're like, "Do you know what? Life is too short. Let's see what we can bring back in again."
Especially if there's benefits to eating it as well.
Yeah.
You mentioned the humidifier there. Can I just ask you about that? Because this is the time of year where we hear the
Yes.
humidifier mentioned, to clear the head
Mhm.
colds and all that kind of winter flu
Yeah.
stuff. Is that an all year round thing for you in terms of it being
Depends.
helpful for people?
Depends on the person. I mean, that's so
Okay.
individual. Like, I think what happens particularly during the winter is we've the central heating on, the air is drier, so it can just be more irritating. But again, anything respiratory like that, you're going to chat to your doctor, see what's going on. Sometimes it's sinuses, you just are born with really small sinuses. And
Yeah.
it's just an issue in food. It's not food, it's just biology with that. But I think if someone finds it useful, I wouldn't necessarily rush out and buy an expensive one. I would see what friend you have has one they're not using and borrow it and see does it make a
Make a
difference? Because
difference.
then, yeah, because if you try and it doesn't work, there's no point you have spent 95 euros on a humidifier. So it's just to try them out a little bit and see does that work for you. But that can be, I find that particularly for someone who gets really bad sinus or bunged up if you've been on a plane where it's very dry,
Yeah.
that might be you saying, "Look, I just need that bit of moisture." But even just hydrating, make sure you're drinking enough water through the day because, like, I'm going to be blunt here, the mucus dries out a little bit. So if you're very dehydrated, everything's a bit dry. So it's kind of let's make sure we're well hydrated as well inside, and then the humidifier might help on the outside as well.
Yeah. And you can feel the puffiness of it sometimes, can't you, when your
Mm.
sinuses are flaring up?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Last two questions, Sarah.
Okay.
Can people with active lifestyles like runners or gym goers use lactose-free, high-protein yogurt for recovery?
Oh, totally. And that's the thing. I mean, we'd often look at yogurt as a recovery food from sports because it has the protein in it. But also you are looking for that little bit of carbohydrate from the lactose that would be in it. But obviously with the lactose free, it's not that the lactose is removed, it's literally just been split into the two smaller sugars. So from that
Mm.
recovery point of view, absolutely, it's going to work perfectly for that.
And is that before or after workout, Sarah?
Both,
Either?
it'll kind of work for
Both.
both. It's one of those things, if you're going to do a very intense workout, you want to probably have it an hour before you're heading in, but certainly afterwards, if you look at kind of foods for recovery, like fruit and yogurt is actually a great thing to add
Okay.
in.
Okay. It's almost like back to basics, isn't it? When we hear of all the things that people are consuming and the pre-workout and the post-workout and the drinks, actually back to basics is probably the most.
Normal food, and there was a fabulous study looking at skimmed milk as a recovery food, and it just performed so well for it, And I'm not a sports dietitian, but when I talk to colleagues who are, like, they just rave about yogurt, fruit, things like that, and like there's such simple things and such good nutrition. And the lovely thing about going food first, is that you get all of the nutrients. If you just go for sort of a protein type supplement, like they're brilliant and they can be so helpful, but there's
Mm,
just protein in them. Whereas if you go for something like a protein yogurt, you have, even, if you look at a lot of yogurts, they have vitamin B12 in them. They've got lots going on in there. It's this gorgeous little package of nutrition that you're getting with it.
yeah, brilliant. Last question. What is the biggest myth buster when it comes to lactose-free dairy? And I'm going to add on little bolt onto that, just in terms of nutrition as well. You might give us that as well.
Well, I think when people see anything a little bit different, they think, is it not going to taste as nice? Whereas the funny thing about a lactose-free sort of yogurt or anything like that, it actually tastes a little bit sweeter, even though there's no extra sugar in it. So that's one of the things people have to say, you sometimes see, even with gluten-free, people think, oh, it's not going to taste as nice. But with the lactose-free, absolutely it does. And it's often liked a little bit more because it's just that touch a little bit sweeter. The other myth is that it's not for everybody, but it totally is. Like, there's anybody, if you happen to pick it up by accident, you don't have to run away from it. It's totally going to be fine with it. But the nutrition is just the same because people are nervous that if anything has been done to your food, that automatically all the goodness has gone out of it. But no, and that's the nice thing about sort of lactose free. It's just the way that it's done. It's just that little split the sugars into the smaller components, but all the protein, all the calcium, everything else is still in there.
Okay, brilliant. Sarah, you have answered a lot of questions this evening. Do you need to lie down after that?
I think I'm going to actually, yeah.
What's for dinner?
Well, my husband's out there making chicken stir fry actually, so
Oh,
I'm
lovely.
I'm going to go down and have that. He's actually fantastic. He does the most amazing chicken stir fry for a guy who didn't like vegetables when we got married. He's really kind of embraced
Oh,
it at
he's
this
married to a
stage. Yeah,
dietitian. It's
he'd no
bound to
choice.
rub off.
Well, it was we're having kids, you need to eat vegetables so that they can, we talk about modeling behavior for our
Oh, of
children.
course.
He's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
fine. So no, it's great. It's good.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you to you for answering all of the questions. And as usual, having all of the right answers and giving honest, educated, informed advice. It's very much appreciated. Thank you to all of the participants and members who have joined this evening. On behalf of Glenisk, they're hugely grateful. The level of interest around this kind of honest advice is astounding in terms of the questions. Would you agree, Sarah? The thousands of questions submitted.
We were looking at the list. I think over 1,000 questions came in.
Yeah.
And, I think with the last one on protein, we had so many questions coming in. I know in my own work, when I go in and give talks or anything like that, people are so confused about things. And it's just lovely
Yeah.
just to have an opportunity to say, look, it doesn't need to be that complicated.
And sometimes it is about coming back to basics.
Yeah.
Glenisk want you guys to stay involved. We will be doing lots more of this wisdom series, and it will be driven by the topics that you want covered. So don't be afraid to email the team. info@glenisk.com is the email address, or engage on any of their social media channels. They'll be very quick, I think, to come back to you. We'll talk to them about the yogurt bread as well, Sarah, and getting the recipe out. I'll do that. I'll do that this
No
week.
problem.
And I'll share it just for proof. Yeah, so do get your questions in. Thank you indeed for carving time out of your precious evenings. We know it's a busy time, particularly with children and families and everything else. And we will keep doing these, and we will keep answering as many questions. And if we didn't get to your question this evening, we will definitely carry it over into the next one. So thank you very much. Have a very pleasant evening. And thank you again to you, Sarah.
Thank you. See you now. Good night.
Good night.